that's like vast.
Yeah, it's like the time this one say that. Over experience.
Yeah. Okay. Can you say anything first?
I'm not sure how you schedule this for 3 hours.
Yeah.
That might be too much for me.
Yeah.
Especially for us, there's really a lot to do.
Is this the final lighting setting?
But
Yeah.
not over 3 hours.
I'm sorry, I'll be here for 1 hour
That's, yeah.
because I have
Put Jerry down.
Yeah.
I have an oral surgery today.
Yeah. No, we got stuff, we've got a course starting tomorrow, so still, I mean, I just got back from the printer, I walked over to the printer after breakfast and got back, so yeah. So essentially, there's a few interesting things we can talk about. In the Muddy Lila chapter 24, text 334, Prabhupada talking about the items of worship. He gives a list of 5 items, he gives a list of 16 items, he gives a list of 64 items. And then at the beginning though, he says that all these things must be available for the pleasure of the Lord. So this needs to be our prime kind of motive when we're serving the deities, is it's for the pleasure of Krishna. It's interesting, Maharaj was talking about in the class today, sense gratification and talking about karma kanda and different, how people, they give up some degree of sense gratification, but they still hang on. So sometimes we find when we dress the deities, we cook for the deities, we do different service for the deities, there's a big element of what I'm getting out of it as well. But as we evolve in Krishna consciousness, as we become purified, our motive is to try to do it for the pleasure of Krishna. It should be more and more, we should be cultivating this mood of counting up these Krishna by the service. And therefore, when we're doing things like, pinning cloth or putting pins into the toe, we need to be very careful not to pin Krishna. And just different things like that. Because I remember when I was a child, I used to make pocket money. I used to do babysitting, and part of babysitting, back in those days they had nappies with pins and stuff like that. So it's just like, if you're changing a nappy on a baby, you stick the baby with a pin, what's going to happen? It's going to scream, and for a long time. Now, Krishna, why? Why does it do that?
Because it hurts.
It hurts. It's not like the baby is an inanimate object. Yeah? And in the same way, Krishna, the deity, is not an inanimate object. It's Krishna directly. And this is supported by that story of Sakshi Gopal, when the young Brahmin, when he goes back to Vrindavan, he says, the deity says, my dear Lord, you're not a statue. He says, Patimana hitumi saksha prajandirandana, you're directly the son of Nandaraj Krishna. So, again, there's another consciousness we need to be cultivating while we're serving the deity, is that I'm not dressing a statue here, I'm not serving a statue here, I'm serving Krishna. The door's locked. And if we can cultivate this mood or cultivate this consciousness, if you're sitting behind the pillar, we can't see you. We're talking about personalism here, so personalism also means
I like it personalism.
we're personalists.
No, I'm joking.
And this is an important point of the service to the deities. It's about an exchange. It's not just I go do my thing, it doesn't matter what happens to the deity. It's about an exchange. So, we dress the deity in a way that's pleasing. We feed the deity in a way that's pleasing. For instance, one thing that's very pleasing, obviously, to Krishna, is that everything should be fresh. Everything should be first class. Not that we cook the offering and finish it half an hour before it's meant to be offered, because the deity gets it stone cold or stale. No, everything should be fresh and as hot as we can possibly make it. Same with the dressing. There's an interesting. There was a Padati that Bhakti-Rod Thakur wrote. Padati means like a method of worship or a system of doing deity worship, and it was included in the back of the Navrit Bhavataranga, which is a book he wrote about Navrit Dham. And in there he was talking about different types of dresses for different seasons, and he was saying with a dress for the summertime, then it should be really lightweight. And then the dress for the winter time, you line it with cotton or silk or something like that, so it's warmer for the deity. So, we dress the deity according to season. And of course also, when we dress the deity, I remember Janani was telling me this years ago, that you dress for the darshan. So because the large deities are actually what they call darshan deities. The small deities are Utsava or Vijay, Vigrahas, different names they have for them. But the idea with the darshan, with the main deities, is you're looking from the perspective of the devotee standing in the temple or the person standing in the temple. What do they see when they look at the deity? So that means like when you put the booklet pieces and all that sort of stuff, they should face forward so that they can see the temple. Same with the rings. Like, Krishna's holding his food like that. There's not much point putting a ring here because no one's going to see it. Krishna might see it, Krishna will see it for sure, but the idea is what's the function of that deity, and that deity is for a darshan. So then we keep that in mind when we're doing the service. And of course, we know that Krishna also explains in the Gita this Yeyatamam Prabhate and Te Tamsatai Vajamyaham. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So the mood we cultivate in the service of the deity, if we deal with Krishna in the deity as a person, then he'll reciprocate with us in that personal way. But if we treat the deity as a statue, that's the kind of reciprocation we're going to get. So, if you think it's okay to feed him cold food, if you think it's okay to stick him with pins and stuff like that, that's the reciprocation you're going to get back from Krishna. So it's very important in the service to the deity is to try to cultivate this, this is directly Krishna, how can I please him? And so with your service, just always be looking how to please him. Anything to say?
I think I've been addressing the deities since 1996. So I'm sure some of you have been addressing it for many years, and it's good to have this type of discussion because after you get sometimes you get a bit too familiar. So I have to try and be consciously conscious that the Lord is before us, and we have to kind of preach to ourselves because we may not be on the level where we're having Shakshat Darshan. We're probably not the level of Baba. So therefore, often for us, the Lord is personally present, but you do the same thing every day, you get very familiar. You get very familiar with what you're doing. And especially when pujaris, they like to dress as nicely as possible, and then you're running out of time, and you're trying to put the turban on, and that's when you're going to start making mistakes and perhaps pinning the Lord when you're rushing and things like that. So I try to cultivate that on the altar where I'm consciously conscious. I'm thinking the Lord is there. I don't always manage it, but I'm trying to cultivate that type of consciousness where you treat, and it's a very wonderful experience. You can actually do that. Sometimes we have criticized, but sometimes we have pujaris that are just new pujaris, and they're just trying to put on as much as possible in the time that they have. They're moving really fast, but they're really not. And sometimes the deed is rocking, It is moving,
Or sometimes you can hear ding.
Yeah, and then at 7 o'clock it's like raining jewels. So some things, I guess you could say, we mentioned about things specifically, but things like this, let's say there's dressing, or doing deity worship in a mode of ignorance. What would that look like? That means you don't even want to do it. You've been told to do it, you have to do it. You're on the schedule, you'd rather do something else. As I know it was mentioned about in class this morning, Mark mentioned about sense gratification is the aim of materialistic life. But when it comes to deity worship, you really learn to be selfless, which means that Krishna is in the center. So we follow Krishna's schedule. Especially if you're a full-time pujari, it can be quite tough sometimes because you want to do your thing, you want to do space. I mean, it's scheduled here. So you could say dressing in mode of ignorance means you're doing it not you're not happily doing it. Then mode of passion, what symptoms of mode of passion that you're dressing to impress. There's no one. You're dressing in such a way that you're conscious who's when you're hoping afterwards someone's going to come along. So we do want to dress nicely, and it is nice when someone comes to us after and says, "Oh, the deities look so nice." It's good. But if that's a motive, it's a mode of passion, so that's when perhaps we can perhaps put things in the deity. And the thing about, you had one slideshow you showed a few years ago, where you took pictures of deities with it. Showed upajaris over the years, where the pins had marked the deities in the marble, wasn't it? Which deities?
All over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, so we really, so really got, when was Radha Govinda installed?
1972.
1972, so how many years is that?
51.
51. So they're going to be here for the next 200, 300, 400, 500 years. So we really want to, especially Nishing often mentions when you put the flute on the Lord. If you're not careful, probably now, probably Radha Govinda, you're probably going to see where the flute gets dragged, you know? Things like that. And I'm going to show we have to be very careful.
Actually, when you put the flute into the Lord's hand, you shouldn't hear it. You know, if you can hear this tick, 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 tick as you move the flute in and out, it's like you're not doing it the right way. You should be able to put the flute in so you can't hear it. And you know, if I had my way, I would ban dual flutes. Because they're the worst thing. They just grind on the marble. I've seen some people who actually bruise in their hands from dual flutes.
Yeah, so you have to be like conscientious, you know, consciously dressing. And again, then with the mode of goodness, then we're not just, we have a pin and we're conscious of the dangers of that pin. Speak a lot about pins here. But then you'll be really conscious how you know how to do it. Pujaris know you put it in such a way that the end comes out, you know. Not the manner they use safety pins. Not how to use safety pins. We don't think much about safety pins because it's still got pin.
Still a pin.
But as the Srinivasa said, that the more you're kind of conscientiously conscious that the Lord is present, and you have to develop that as well. You have to kind of develop that consciousness so you go in, and that's why we prepare before we go on the altar. We do Achman. The idea is that the first stages of Pujari worship is preparing ourselves in the morning. Abhigamana, like preparing ourselves. So when we're taking shower, cleaning our teeth, taking shower, we are preparing ourselves to actually come before the Lord. Actually preparing, and then we do Achman, then we say prayer, we're trying to fine-tune our consciousness before we actually come before the Lord. So, yeah, I always find it, I mean, even now, I must admit, sometimes a head pujari, Vamsi Baku, I was head pujari, now he's on my case. It's good. But something came to me and he said, the turban you did yesterday, this was a few months ago, there was a pin coming through. It's after so many years of dressing. So, yeah, that's why it's really like the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and so especially when you're worshipping deities, super Krishna consciousness, Krishna's there in front of us. And also we're cooking for him, we're thinking about him, dressing him in such a way. Yeah, anyway, just mention those from my experience of being consciously conscious. You know. And these type of meetings help. You know, call it Pujari Katar. You know, we start speaking about our service and things that, as Pujaris, then we have to be reminded about. It's very good. You know,
The thing with pins also, this is a big issue because I mean I've only seen a few deities in ISKCON that have no scratches or very few scratches. I think Radha Govinda Madhav and Yamaikal, I think they've got 2 scratches on them. And you know, they're installed in I think last half of the 70s, so late 70s.
1980.
Huh?
1980?
1980 was it? Yeah. So in all those years, like you know, that's 43 years, and they've got 2 scratches on them. That's pretty good. One deity that's got no scratches on them is Radha Madhava in Kiev.
because they don't
They don't
use
use
pins.
pins. Simple, and you might think that, well, how are they gonna address the deities without pins? But they do it very nicely. What they use is, you know, there's like those hair clips you get like that? So they use little ones like that, and they glue them onto things and stuff, or they hold the fabric. And also they use magnets. You get these rare earth magnets, or these neodymium magnets, which are super strong. You get a magnet like this round, you can lift a tractor with it, and they show different things of what they're doing. And so they use that, and that's very effective. I remember Nari, when she was in South Australia, she was telling that Prabhupada told them not to use pins. So, you know, if you can figure out ways of dressing the deity without using pins, it's much better. Because if you're using pins, invariably you're going to scratch the deities. At some point you'll scratch the deities. So if you are concerned about that, then that's better to not use pins. Although there are some things you can do, you know, techniques you can use, just like in Villa Vrindavan, for instance, the time before last I was there, I was on the altar and I was watching Karuna Russell's head with Joe. She's been dedicated to the deities, what, 30 years or something like that? She's been there a long time. Long time she's been there. And I was watching how she was dressing the deities. What's the deity's name?
Rajasundar.
Rajasundar.
Radha Rajasundar.
Rajasundar, yeah. So she's dressing Radha Rajasundar. Interesting place because I'm not sure what the backstory is, but you know, like when you go to take darshan, there's bulletproof glass in front of you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's interesting. But it's a very, very beautiful place, very, very beautiful deities. What they do is like when they're putting Radharani's veil on, the common thing is the devotees will put Radharani's hair on, and then they'll pin the veil to the hair. But what they do there is they pin the veil to the hair before they put it on the deity. So that way there's no chance of scratching the deity. So, you know, if you feel the need to persist with pins, then it's good to develop ways of using the pins so that you can't touch the deity, or you won't touch the deity. Because, again, it gets back to this point that Krishna is a person. And if we accept he's a person, if we're trying to cultivate this awareness of him as present or as a person, then how can we stick him with pins? You know, because sticking with pins means you don't think he's a person. Even accidentally, you know, it's like I was saying before, when you're dressing a baby, there's no way known you're going to stick the baby with pins. You know, so we need to try to cultivate this awareness when we're dressing a deity as well. I think it's very, very important. And yeah, many deities are very, very badly scratched. And Melody was making an interesting point there about this familiarity. And we see this, especially, you know, you've been a Vajrayana 10, 15, 20 years, the tendency is I've done this all before, I know how to do it. But how do we avoid familiarity? Any thoughts on that? Becoming familiar with you, becoming familiar with the service. How do we avoid that? Yeah.
Sharing the service with someone else.
Yeah, discussing service with others, yeah, that's very important. Especially like you say, having meetings, what we were saying, having meetings or discussions like this. Any other way you can think of?
Training others. How
Training others, yeah, that's also important. Training is very important.
Follow the instructions,
Following the
follow the
instructions,
instructions and, you know, train properly.
yeah. And carefully following the rules and regulations in relation to deity worship, because, you know, there's a nice verse in I think it's the Padma Purana, isn't it? Smata Vyasa Vishnu Vishwatavyanajata Seva Nisirishum Nitya That the goal of life is to always remember Krishna and never forget. These are the two principles, the two main principles of bhakti, is to always remember Krishna and never forget him. And Rupa Goswami, he quotes this verse, and he's explaining that all the rules and regulations support these two principles. Because Prabhupada talks about the do's and the do-nots. So all the do-nots, why do we do the do-nots? The things, don't do this, don't do that. Why do we have those things there? What's the function?
Protecting us,
For protection.
to remind
Because we have a tendency to do it.
No, so we don't forget Krishna. Because you look at all the do-nots, they're things that will cause us to forget Krishna. And why do we follow all the do's?
to remember Krishna.
To remember
To
Krishna.
please the Krishna.
So if we're very carefully following the rules and regulations of devotional service and deity worship, then the tendency to become familiar is avoided. Yeah? But if we neglect the rules and regulations, then we'll tend to forget Krishna. So that's, and deity worship, and I know it's boring for some folks, but deity worship is governed by rules. It's what they call Deity Sadhana Bhakti. So Deity means rules, Sadhana means regulated. So it's a regulated application of rules in our lives so that we can become purified, so we can get to this point of always remembering Krishna. And it's interesting, when Prabhupada was first introducing devotees to deity worship, he was talking about some of the rules, and then I think it might be Malachi or someone like that said, "Oh, Swamiji, there's so many rules." And Prabhupada, he went back and said, "If I told you all the rules, you would faint." And it's like that in deity worship. There's so many rules. There's 64 different types of offenses, so many different things. But the point of the rules is so we can come to this point of understanding that this is Krishna directly in front of me. And once you have that realization that this is Krishna directly in front of me, that there's no scope for offenses, there's no scope for inattentive worship, because God is right here, He's right in front of me. So how could I ever, because the offenses are broken into 4 different categories. There's lack of purity in body and mind, there's lack of endeavor, disrespect, and remember the 4th one? No, I can't remember what the fourth one is. But if you look at these different categories, if we accept that the deity is directly Krishna, if we accept the relationship that I'm the servant, He's the master, and I'm Anu, He's Vibhu, if we accept this difference between Him and me, there's no question of ever committing offenses. So this is why the rules and regulations are very helpful, because they help us to cultivate this understanding of who it is I'm dealing with. And Prabhupada, in Prabhupada, at the end of the 10th chapter of Gita, he makes this point of why there's all this detailed knowledge about Krishna's position, His potency, His grandeur, is so that we understand who we're dealing with. And oftentimes you come across pujaris that they're so-called cultivating the Vrindavan mood in their worship. But actually, at this point in our evolution in bhakti, we're not qualified for that. Prabhupada, he really clearly defines what the Vrindavan mood means. He says that Vrindavan mood means that you cannot help but think of Krishna 24 hours a day. And which one of us is doing that? 24/7, we're just thinking of Krishna. It'd be nice. I hope we get there one day. But I know I'm not there. And it's rare to find someone who is there. And so that's Vrindavan. So, especially in our temples in ISKCON, Prabhupada was really clear on the mood of worship is this Aishvarya, this Lakshmi Narayan. He said, even though it's Radha Krishna Vigraha, still the worship is accepted by Lakshmi Narayan, because the Radha Krishna are approached by this Ragma or this Bhav Seva, whereas Lakshmi Narayan are more approached by Vidhi. And this is suitable for people who are not free from material desires, which is us. We have so many material desires, therefore it's really important to follow the rules, and by following the rules, we'll purify our heart, we'll remove the anathas, and we'll come to actually accept, we'll come to understand that this is Krishna directly before me. And then we can start to make some serious spiritual advancement. And I'm not sure, but any questions or comments or points you want to discuss? Sure,
Yeah. If you can go over like punctuality, cleanliness, and
You really want me to go over cleanliness?
I know, but it's short, like so everybody understands. So in the meeting, we discuss, but then in reality, it doesn't happen.
Prabhupada says, if you're always attentive to cleanliness and punctuality, Krishna will be happy to accept your offerings. So if you're not attentive to punctuality and cleanliness, what can we conclude?
Will not be happy.
He won't be happy. He won't be happy.
They won't be.
In a letter Prabhupada wrote to Rukmini. Rukmini was one of the early pujaris. I think you all know Rukmini, Nirusma's good wife. And he said, the idea is summit cleanliness. That will satisfy Krishna. So you know what summit cleanliness means?
Highest top.
When you're on the summit of the mountain, what does that mean? Can you go higher? No, you can't go any higher. I'll tell you a story. This Jamuna told me this story. she was in Vrindavan, it was when the devotees first went there with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was staying in his rooms in Damodar. And she had the service which she really enjoyed of cleaning Prabhupada's rooms. And Jamuna was very, very attentive to make sure that everything was clean. She'd wipe all the pens down, she'd wipe the staples, she'd wipe everything down, and put it back exactly where it was. And very, very attentive. And so Prabhupada came back one morning walk, and she was feeling happy because she felt she'd cleaned Prabhupada's rooms very cleanly. And Prabhupada said, Jamuna, when will you ever learn? And she said, Swamiji. And Prabhupada said, when will you ever learn? And Jamuna said, Swamiji, I don't understand what you mean. He said, when will you ever learn to clean? And she was like bewildered because she thought everything was spotless. And so Prabhupada, he picked up the stapler on his desk, he opened the stapler, he wiped it, and he said, see, dust inside the stapler. And so if there's dust inside the stapler, it's not clean. So, if there's grease on the wall in the kitchen, there's not just a little bit of grease on the wall in the kitchen, there's a lot of grease on the wall in the kitchen. It's not clean. If the stove tops have got charcoal on them from not being regularly clean, it's not clean. I haven't looked around much, but I've looked around a bit, and there's a lot of service here. A lot of service to be done. And it's just like, okay, so starting tomorrow, I can't remember, starting tomorrow, next day, we do a session on cleaning paraphernalia. And the idea is to show you what clean paraphernalia means. Now, how you clean it's up to you. Of course, we avoid things that are contaminated, things that have alcohol, like there's a company called Reckitt Coleman, I think they're a US company. They make these things called brass and silver. They have alcohol in them, so we don't use them. And different products. I've heard that barkeeper's friend is pucker, so we use soap and scrubber pads. You can also use things like tamarind, etc. But the idea, Sadatana Goswami explains that when the item is without stain or odor and restored to its original nature, then that's clean. So just like, I don't know if you ever had the experience, sometimes devotees, they'll polish cartels with brasso, and you're playing the cartels, and what winds up happening? You get black all over your fingers from the brasso. So that feels like an emulsion layer on the brasso to stop the oxygen from getting into the metal, so it stays shiny longer. But it's not artificial. The idea is like everything should be shined, like Prabhupada said in a letter, the arti paraphernalia should be shined after each use. There's a nice photo you can see. It may have been in Los Angeles, I'm not sure, where Prabhupada's sitting on like this striped cushion, like a rainbow, and he's got a silver plate in front of him. And the silver plate is so shiny, you practically can't see it. Who's going to be attending the course here? A few of you. Okay, so one thing we'll do is we'll share with you this audio file of Hari Swarupu discussing Prabhupada on cleanliness, and there's some fantastic information there. And you really get the sense of how clean Prabhupada is. It's like one story I can tell. It's like Hari Swarupu was serving Prabhupada. He served him for 18 months, I think. Pretty fortunate soul to have to serve Prabhupada that long. And so one time Prabhupada, he asked, bring me some salt. So this is in Vrindavan. So Hari Swarupu ran off and got some salt. And then took him some time. He brought it back and gave it to Prabhupada. Next day Prabhupada again asked for some salt. Immediately he gave the salt to Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada said, huh?
Same problem.
Yeah. And Prabhupada said, yesterday when I asked you to get the salt, it took you this amount of time. Today you gave it to me immediately. Why? He said, I saved it from yesterday. You know what Prabhupada said? Knowledge. Because you don't do that. Like I was one temple just a few days ago, and they had salt and pepper shakers for the deities, which is nice. They did the same manner, but they were using the same salt and pepper every day. You can have things like that, but change the salt. It should be fresh. Everything for Krishna has to be fresh.
Yes.
First class. No second. We're not dealing with some second-rate person here. We're dealing with God. And if you want to understand that you're dealing with God, you have to cultivate this awareness. And the way you cultivate this awareness is by things like giving him the best of everything, because he is the best. So it's just natural, just like your guru comes to town, right? Do you give him anything second rate? Do you give him your old used clothes to wear, or what the leftovers from your fridge? No. So why do it to Krishna? Why give Krishna second-rate things? Why give Krishna things that are made by non-devotees? You know, like it's quite a common thing here in the US that they offer this boxed fruit juice to the deities. You know, that's like second-class, third-class stuff. I very strongly discourage it. It is prepared by people who do not understand anything about cleanliness. And of course, when they're making these things, same as the bottle of lemon juice sometimes devotees use when they're polishing deities. When they're making these things, do they use the best quality? Of course not. That's the stuff they put on the shelves in the supermarket. You know, when you go to buy the fruit, they use all the rubbish they can't sell. Because for them, you know, like it's not about bhakti for them. It's not about developing a loving relationship with Krishna. It's about bhakti. It's about making money. That's all it's about. You know? It's just like, I'll put in a plug here. I got to do this. We have a dress shop in Mayapur. The whole purpose of this dress shop is to make nice clothes for Krishna. And also we need to make money because, you know, we're paid. But the whole point is to make nice clothes for Krishna. So therefore, we don't glue the sequins on. We don't glue the hems. I told them, no glue. Ban the glue, you know, because you go to these guys in Vrindavan, everything's glued on. You know, and you'll see it, like after some time, all the sequins fall off. All the jewels fall off because they're glued on. So, you know, it really gets down to the motive. What's your motive? It's like when you're cooking. Are you cooking because you want to enjoy it, you want to eat it? I remember one temple I used to visit regularly. There was a lady who used to cook the Sandhya Bhoga, and she'd always cook what her friends liked. So that the friends, you know, the friends will glorify her. But no, we cook what Krishna likes. And if you don't understand what Krishna likes, what does Prabhupada like? You know, there's plenty of information there to find out. You know, I just finished reading a section in Chaitanya Charitamrita where it's talking about the things that Damayanti used to make for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So many nice recipes there. Or, you know, in different places in Chaitanya Charitamrita talks about the things that are offered to Krishna. Or you can see in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, what's that song called? Bhogati. Yeah. It also talks about many nice things offered to Krishna. So, like, the single most important thing in deity worship is cleanliness. Whenever Prabhupada talks about these two items, cleanliness and punctuality, he always says cleanliness first. And in Sanskrit, there's a rule of order. The first thing is the most important. And punctuality. And everything here has to be so clean. Spotlessly clean. This whole temple, I mean, I was just saying to him earlier, you know, I could spend the rest of my life in here cleaning this temple. I mean, please forgive me, but it's really good. Really good.
You're right.
I'll tell you a story. Okay, this is another story. Shiva Rama Maharaj, I don't know if you know Shiva Rama Maharaj, he is a Paka Vaishnava, a Paka Brahmana, right? One of his disciples came to pick him up to take him to a program. He opened the door of the car and said, I'm not getting in there. Because it was too dirty. So what do you think when you bring these things before Krishna and they're all filthy dirty, you think he's going to, oh great, love it. No. You know, you've got to develop this consciousness of, you know, you're dealing with the supreme pure, or Prabhupada sometimes would say the extreme pure. In order to approach Krishna, it means you have to become pure. And purity doesn't just mean internal, because how can you be internally pure if you're not externally pure? And so if your environment, if the puja paraphernalia, if the things you're offering to Krishna are impure, how do you think Krishna, do you think Krishna will accept these things? So it's very, very important that we cultivate purity in our service to Krishna. I mean, I was just saying this to Merlin this morning about, how can, what do I have to do internally to be able to really impress upon others in devotional service the necessity of purity. If you can't purify yourself, you're not coming back to Godhead. As simple as that. And it begins by the external. If your environment is pure, if your clothes are pure, if your activities are pure, then naturally it's going to purify you internally. But on the opposite, if externally you're living in an impure way, then it's going to contaminate your consciousness even further. So you really need to look at that. What you can do here to clean things up. And the things I would probably encourage you to start with the paraphernalia that's used for deities and the kitchen. Kitchen needs a lot of work.
Thank you so much.
And it's not like it's hard. You know, like most of the stuff on the walls in the kitchen is just soapy water, warm soapy water will take it off. Because I just grabbed a cloth yesterday and I rubbed it a little bit and it came off. You know, so it's just a matter of doing it. What they do in Hungary, the farm in Hungary, the only two places I've ever seen in ISKCON that are somewhat clean, I wouldn't say they're completely clean, but they're somewhat clean, are the farm in Hungary and the temple in Budapest. They're the only two places I've seen that are mostly clean. And in Budapest I had to really look hard. But what was my point there?
Very clean.
World War
They
II.
training, they get training.
Yeah, the first class training, they're really well trained, but the point, I can't remember what the point I was leading to, but the point is like, if you're not clean, then it's doubtful if Krishna's going to accept your offerings. You know? But if you're very clean, then Krishna, as Prabhupada said, Krishna will be happy to accept your offerings. So the purity is an essential part of the process of bhakti, but also it's really important in deity worship. Because the point of deity worship is to teach us how to become clean. Because the reason we follow the rules and regulations is to remove the anarthas so that the jiva can become revealed. Because the jiva is so covered over with anarthas, you've got no idea who you are. We're all thinking man, woman, whatever. American, Indian, Australian. We're none of these things. We're eternal servant of Krishna. But until we can remove the anarthas through the process of purification, that won't be revealed. So, we really have to work on cleanliness. Is that okay?
Thank you so much.
I guess you've been talking about this for a while. But the thing, that's the thing, Hungary, that's what I'm getting. In Hungary, the Raj bowl cook has to clean the whole kitchen before they start. They strip the stove down, they clean the whole stove, they do the walls, they do the extractor hood, the whole thing. And then you guys are lucky you've got a gas stove. They have a wood-fired stove. So imagine how much more they have to clean. But it's a standard. And so, you need to incorporate things like that. Instead, the idea that someone can cook and boil stuff over and just leave it, that's just unacceptable. So, I would encourage as you bring new cooks in, establish a standard of what you want, when it should be cleaned, what should be done every time. And the new cooks come, they get trained up, and the old cooks also get trained up, and that's what you do. That each day, everything in the kitchen is cleaned. If you, I've done service in the kitchen with Millimana. He's, by the way, a very good cook. He makes great milk sweets, great Raj bowl. And when he's in the kitchen, right, he takes a container, takes something out of the container, wipes the container, puts it back on the shelf. Because your hands aren't clean. You might have ghee on your hands, you might have flour on your hands. You put the thing back on the shelf, and guess what? There's a fingerprint there. Cockroach can live on that for a few weeks. So you wipe everything before you put it back on the shelf. Avoid plastic in the kitchen. Try to have metal containers. Plastic's very hard to keep clean. Metal, just metal containers are good. All the ones in London are metal, right? They're stainless steel. Mostly.
No.
All the small ones.
Yeah, all the small ones are,
All ones on the shelves in bed.
all the big storage units.
Yeah.
Plastic.
So you wipe, you use something, you wipe it, put it back on the shelf. Keep your hands clean. Keep a towel over your shoulder. Wipe your hands. Keep your hands clean and dry all the time. Because otherwise, what happens? You've got stuff in your hands. You just spread it all over the kitchen. One of the things I notice commonly when I go to temples is around the light switches, around the door handles, is a stain from the workers not having clean hands.
Right.
Even one time, I'm quoting Shiva Maharaj a few times today. I remember years ago, before they had this Budapest temple, they had a temple up the hill in Budapest, and Shiva Maharaj was giving a Gita class in the evening, and so we were all there with Indra Maharaj. We were doing a tour of Hungary, and he was giving class, and he said to everyone to go out, because all the shoes, Hare Krishna shoes like this all over the place. So everyone go outside, put the shoes on the shelf. So everyone went out, put the shoes on the shelf. One or the other shelf, so they have to go out. Sort of fastidious and stuff like that. And so then when everyone came back in, Maharaj asked, who washed their hands? After touching your shoes, you should wash your hands. After touching a broom, you should wash your hands. After touching the floor, you should wash your hands.
Yeah.
After touching the lower body, you should wash your hands. Anything below the navel is unclean. And it's interesting, I was reading in the second canto, 5th chapter, a few days ago, that all the lower planets are on the lower half of Krishna's body, or of the Rupa, the universal form's body. And all the upper planets, or middle and upper planets, are from the navel upwards. So the lower half is considered impure. And so you touch the lower part of the body, you touch the lower cloth, impure, purified hands. You don't put anything for the deity on your lower cloth. It's so common when devotees are doing the small deities, is they put the dress on the lower cloth, they put the garland, we've just contaminated it. So, yeah. There's lots of rules about it, and that's why Prabhupada said, if I told you all the rules, you'd faint. And the same with, like, you know, even cleaning things. Like, it's common that devotees think, I clean something by using soap and water. But soap and water is used for one thing: cotton cloth. And that's all it cleans. Metal? No, that's not going to clean metal. You use something abrasive. You know, silk is purified by wind. Jute, I forgot. Wool is always pure. Wool's never impure. Yeah, just different, I can't remember all the different things, but there's a whole section that's pulled out from one of the Puranas, which is in the Deity Worship book, describes all the different types of purities and stuff. But it's important for pujaris to know that. For Brahmins, you know, a Brahmin understands. A Brahmin can distinguish between pure and impure. I understand what's pure and what's not pure. And if you're not sure, then don't offer it. I was staying in a room the other day, and there was a bottle of water sitting on the bench, but I didn't know whether it was a clean bottle or not, so I didn't touch it. It obviously had been opened, but I didn't know if it was pure or not, so I wouldn't touch it. You need to develop that kind of awareness.
Maybe give others a chance.
Huh?
Maybe give others a chance first.
Sure.
I have a small questions.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, if you could speak about, you're speaking about cleanliness of like paraphernalia and things, but our own cleanliness, like when we doing deity service, because I've been to so many different temples and everyone, I mean, they say like different things, you know, about the standard, but I'm from Durban, so like the standard is pretty strict there, like very strict about.
Well, that's what David told you, right?
No, I know, like, I mean, I'm used to that standard, and then, you know, when you travel to different places, it can be like, oh, it's more like relaxed. So I'm wondering, like, if you could speak about, I mean, at least I know we don't eat, like you have to have a shower, don't eat, don't use the bathroom, anything before, like doing any kind of deity service.
Well, that's
anything
interesting
related
because,
to deity.
yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of misconceptions about these things.
Yeah.
For instance, the common conception is you need to bathe after you eat.
Mm-hmm.
That's wrong.
Oh.
Because what's the nature of prasad?
Pure.
It's pure. It's complete. It's transcendental. So when you take prasad, you become purified, not that you become impure. And actually, according to Shastra, it's forbidden to bathe after eating. But when you take prasad, what happens is small drops of the prasad may fall from your mouth onto your clothes. So your clothes become impure. So when you eat, you'll find, like, especially with experienced pujaris in India, is they'll take off their altar clothes, they'll put on a gamcha, take prasad, they'll wash their legs from the knees down, rinse their mouth out 3, 4, 10 times. The Shastra is different. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 10. The main point is to rinse your mouth out sufficiently so there's no food particles left inside. But don't brush your teeth because then you have to take bath. Yeah. So you rinse your mouth out, wash your hands, etc. Do achman. Put your clothes back on. Do achman, go back on the altar. No problems. Pure. Also, there's an interesting conversation. Not conversation. I think it's a lecture Prabhupada gave, possibly on the 6th canto, where he talks about the latrine. And he mentions there that you can go, you pass water, right? You take your clothes off to pass water, right? And you wash your legs from the knees down with mud. Previously mud, it says now soap and water, several times. Yeah? Then you put on your clothes, you wash your hands, your mouth, all that stuff, or you wash your hands now prior to putting on your clothes. Then do achman, you go back on the altar. So this is socham. That's what I'm meant to. So also, you know, after passing water, you don't need to bathe. So after eating, after passing stool, you have to bathe. After, and the thing is interesting, like, you know, with a lot of these things, the mullah that come from the body, you know, like the eye stuff, what do they call that? I can't remember what they call that.
Crust.
Sleep, or at least call it sleep, and saliva, mucus, all that sort of stuff, it wax from ears. If it falls on the lower part of your body, you simply wash that area. If it falls on the upper part of the body, you should bathe. Urine, same thing. If it falls on the lower part of the body, you just wash the area with soap and water. If it falls on the upper part of the body, you have to bathe. And so it's like, these things are often not understood. You know, and the Shastra makes clear delineations between the different points. And you know, Ya Shastra Vidi Mushate Vata Devi Kavan, you know, if you don't act according to Shastra, then, you know, that's not the verse. What's the other verse? Shruti Shmiti Purari Patra Vidimya, I can't Utpataya Utpataya. That if your so-called, proper translated, so-called devotional service is not according to the Shruti and the Smriti, then it's nothing but a disturbance of society. So when we do the deity worship, it needs to become done according to scripture and the way the acharyas present the scripture to us. Not that we just like, you know, one temple makes this up, one temple makes that up, or they apply it differently here, there, whatever, but rather understand what the Shastra says and apply that. You know, and there's letters from Prabhupada where he describes, you know, different ways of, you know, how to do deity worship. You always talk about wash hands. You know, like, you know, you come, you offer something to deity, you purify your hand. You touch something impure, you purify your hand. So it means you touch the floor, you touch the broom, you touch the asana you're sitting on, you touch your lower body, your feet, or you purify your hand. Well, also another thing is when you offer something to the deity, it's prasad. Once you've offered, you need to purify your hand before you touch bhoga. Huh? Because you've been holding prasad. If you hold prasad and you touch something that's not prasad, then it becomes contaminated, you can no longer be offered. A lot of devotees don't do that.
Do you have a separate Brigari kitchen?
Yes, upstairs.
It's tiny.
I'll do a tour of it.
Be a
Are
quick
you
one.
thinking of something specific? Or
No, I was just wondering about, like, I'm glad that you spoke about the different, because, I mean, we just hear different things everywhere.
Yeah,
you know,
different
so-
places you go to different areas. One of the things that you'll see in the kitchen they have in London is the walls are all lined with stainless steel, right?
And marble, yeah.
Stainless steel and marble, so it's easy to clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to have such trouble, just painted walls. It's, you know, steel, marble, it's easy to wash.
So a good thing to do is like, you know, because I understand one of the ambitions here is to renovate this building. So when you get around to renovating the deity department, think cleanliness. I've done a lot of renovations in deity departments. One we did in Sydney is when all the work we did, because there was a massive cockroach problem in Sydney. Not just the temple, just everywhere in Sydney had a cockroach problem. So everything we did with that in mind is how to keep the cockroaches out. So even when we put pieces of wood together, we sealed them with a gap filler so nothing can get in between the gaps, just to, you know, keep them out, because cockroaches are intense. Once you get them in there, they're hard to get rid of.
Yeah, we used to have, since we put the steel, since we had refurbishment, we got rid of it.
So if you do, yeah.
Tiles on a wall is also good.
Tiles.
Tiles on a wall.
Tiles, then you have the grout to keep clean.
Gravel
Yeah,
stuff.
that's
Grouts are pain.
the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Stainless steel's great because it's just, you know,
Yeah,
to
easy.
the edge sort of thing. And you know, large marble slabs.
After a few years, it looks really bad, you know, the black grout.
That's
you know.
true.
Yeah, because it goes mold.
5 or 6 years.
It gets mold and it's really hard to keep clean.
Yeah.
So you got to, you know, think of all that sort of stuff when you're doing renovation. And tiles, they break too. They're brittle. And the devotees often aren't very gentle.
They do it rush.
Huh?
Sometimes they do the rush out, in and out of it.
Bang things, slam things, break things. Braj Mahanji. We had two Braj Mahans in our course
Yeah, that
last
was
year.
fun.
One was this big, and he was about this big, he was the senior, he's this big, and he was the junior.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the other one had been a devotee since birth,
Yeah.
so he was the senior.
I had a question about, 'cause I've heard related to this one, that in Hungary Shiva Maharaj created a standard, at least for the farm, I heard, that any devotees who are getting like brahminical initiation or sacred initiation, it's like mandatory that they do some also worship at some, even if it's just a small thing, like once or twice a
We have
week.
to say
something.
that as well.
Many temples in the world have this standard. In Australia, a few temples there, Melbourne has that, Sydney has that.
Yeah.
Unless you commit, and the thing is, not to commit to the temple authorities, commit to the guru.
Right.
You know, because the temple authorities is like,
Yeah.
but when you commit to the guru, you know, because it seems like, especially younger devotees tend to take the relationship with the spiritual master more serious than they might with temple authorities.
Do you have one question, do you struggle for pujaris here, or you have many pujaris?
We have many,
You have many,
many.
so you're not short pujaris, it's just the problem is giving them all service. That's good.
Yeah,
It's
I
good
mean,
problem to have.
my experience or my observation has been, we do have many second initiate devotees, just in the temple, but also in the community, like a lot. We have some challenge in like inspiring them to come and take up service, rather than, because like the forcing them to do service, like we're just getting for this day, it doesn't work.
Sometimes you find, especially in the past, if you had less pujaris here, and you see, they can relate or they see pujaris who practically, say, killed themselves over years and years doing so much service that it creates a kind of apprehension to come forward.
Right.
For some, they've got to try and break that paradigm, and that you offer them to do once every 2 weeks, 1 hour, once every 3 weeks. Don't as soon as they come forward, okay, you're going to cook the large bowl 3 times a week. You want to make it so it's pleasurable for them, and it's something that's bite-sized, and they want to come in, and they're enthusiastic about coming in, and try not to then not take advantage, but because they're coming every week, try not to put more and more on top of them, but share it out. Share it out. Even you can break down the service to get someone to help.
Yeah, like in Los Angeles, what they do is like in the morning when they're dressing deities, is one group of devotees comes down dressed as deities, another group of devotees comes to dress as deities. So it means like, there's twice as many people in the service. But one point also, just to follow up what Merle was saying, it's like try to keep the worship as simple as practical as well, because what happened during the 80s, especially 80s and 90s, is there was a group of devotees in ISKCON who were really into deity worship, and they just kept pushing the standards up and up and up, and they became more and more elaborate. And they became like a very specialist kind of service, where it was a very exclusive, almost like a club. And that's not my mood at all. My mood is like, I try to follow what Prabhupada had explained to his disciples, is to keep the worship simple. And so you don't want to make the worship over elaborate, or the qualification for doing the worship too high. The qualification is chanting 16 hours, following 4 regular rituals, chanting Panchakapatri mantras, and trying to become brahminical. So I encourage those to keep the ritual as simple as possible, and not trying to make it too elaborate, because that scares a lot of people away too. It's too complicated. That's not going to say that.
No, just that in London we used to struggle with pujaris, and since we introduced this, if you want second initiation, then you have to commit to some pujari seva. We have to see them doing it. Now we have a queue. We've done the problem, but some places we have a queue of devotees coming into the service. So they can get recommended for second. Of course, some fall off the other end, they stop coming. Then we've got new coming, and we've got new devotees coming in all the time.
Yeah.
So, but your question again was more about that point.
Yeah.
You've got to think of generations. You've got, there's something called OAPs. You heard of OAPs? Old age pujaris.
Oh.
And there's a lot of them in our temples, especially remember we went to France, in Bangladesh. They're all in their 70s.
Bangladesh in Italy.
In Italy, yeah, in the 70s and 80s, So you've got to keep your eye on that, especially the managers. You've got to encourage young couples to come in. Okay, they're young couples, they're associating together and they're quite excited to cook together in the Pujari garden. But then children may come along, so they'll be off for a few years, but then they come back again. But we're always on the lookout for that, encouraging young people. And also in London we have these pre-service courses that we do, where devotees, they can come and take part in
Talk about the pathway too.
yeah, they come and take part in this little seminar, 2 or 3 hours or 4 or 5, and we take them through the basics of Jari service. Then that's a pathway for them to come in and get some service in the Pujari department. We have like, first they will come in and do backup service, you know, cleaning, things like that. Cleaning goes on. And then if they're inclined, then they eventually do some. Second, then eventually might do some cooking first. You are probably different. Because most people, Pujari said they wanted to get straight on the altar. So not just Radha Krishna.
I'd just rather go in there.
No, first you start, you know, you do cooking.
Right.
For 10 or 20 years. No, for some time, and then, so we do have a pathway.
And in London, you only get to dress Radha Londonishwara by invitation. It's not like it's an automatic thing. I've been doing this for so many years now. I can dress Radha Londonishwara. It's not like that. And I think that you know with the main deities, it should be, you know, you really need to see that someone's qualified. You really need to see that they've got their consciousness in the right place. And the whole idea behind having the pathway is that the head Pujari, whoever has that responsibility to engage people in devotees themselves, can see if they're taking the process seriously. They understand cleanliness, so they're trying to cultivate the personal kind of concept. You know, because it's like when devotees get Brahman Diksha, they're so eager to get on the altar, but do you really want them on the altar? You know, is it going to create, you know, problems?
That's true.
And so you really need to spend time, especially here, you know, because you have a deity that was worshipped by Prabhupada, installed by Prabhupada in Pandal in Jaipur or where it was. You know, London Ishra, I mean, there's the first marble deities in ISKCON. These are like, you know, significant deities. You know, you don't want to put that at risk. So you want to make sure that the devotees who are caring for the deities are suitably trained, and you see that, you know, they're doing their best to do things properly. You know? And Banu Maharishi makes an interesting point, just to your question, is that the only reason for the Panchakshara Gayatri mantras is to worship the deity. There's no other point. So, you know, you don't need those mantras to preach. You don't need those mantras to do anything else. You can go back, you know, you can go back to Godhead without it. But,
So because also devotees living outside, then they are busy. They've got families, they've got jobs. So you can't expect too much from them. But every month or something, can often come in, tidy the flower fridge once in 2 weeks or something. Tidy the boba shelves. Come in and clean the boba. Come in and fill up the spices once a month. Things like that. And once they start coming, they get a taste for it. And then when they get a taste, oh, it's really great. It's really good. Then they start telling their friends about it. It also creates a nice, because sometimes they have trouble getting here because of traffic.
Yeah,
You know, strikes, traffic, and it creates an excitement. Oh, it took so much to get here. You know, so I'm sure you have that already. You do have that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just that focus. So speaking about everyone's heard of being house blind. You know house blind, the term house blind? Where your house or your place, you may not notice how dirty it's become. But then when someone comes in and comes from the highest down, they think, my God. So we had, when Shingravachi came to inspect that Vajrayana department. And when which year was that?
2010.
2010, anyway. He's coming from, you know, everything's dirty, you know, so. But then we've, you know, the point of house plane, sometimes within a community, you know, within the Abhijay department, we struggle as well. We come to house plane. The standards, you just don't notice it. Don't notice the dust, it goes down and down and down, and everyone walks in every day. And for you, it's just normal. That's why you find those who take part in the course, you find it interesting because we clean paraphernalia. And you see what it looks like before. And then you'll see what brass actually looks like, copper actually looks like. Before you kind of know. You get the idea. So it's good to be challenged to break our paradigms, you know.
Get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, shake things up a bit, you know. Any other questions? Any other?
I have a whole list from Pacharis in San Diego. I don't want to overwhelm you.
We can do now according to time, and also we can have a separate meeting as well if you like.
It's not up to me. It's
That's good.
That's good.
okay.
You can, you know our time people, you can tell
Yeah.
us when to.
Okay. Is it improper to begin morning dressing 10 to 15 minutes late, or even so late one is dressing during the Boga offering before Darshan Arti? It's sort of common sense.
I mean, like, there's different ways you can look at it. I mean, like, one way you could see it is as long as you've done the service on time and you're not sort of like, you know, traumatizing the deity because you're going so fast, then okay. But the other thing is also to keep in mind is the devotees you're doing service with. And if they're in anxiety because you're turning up at 6:15 to do a service that everyone else takes an hour and a half to do, and the darshan's at 7, then you're putting them in anxiety also, which then disturbs their service. So better to come in, straight after the Mangalati and just do the service in a relaxed way and not stress anyone out.
Okay. Is it proper to offer Boga early for convenience?
Yes,
Or to shorten Arti by
yes.
5 to 10 minutes?
Is it proper?
Minutes for the same reason?
It's improper,
Okay,
completely improper.
that's all he wants to know.
Should be on time.
Okay.
It's not before time.
Because it's like Aishwarya, the worship Aishwarya, it's Lakshmi Ryan. Everything's strictly on time. If the arti is 25 minutes, it means 25 minutes.
Very nice.
By the minute hand, not by the second hand. By the minute hand.
Yeah, sometimes we have fast for some, we cook Raj Bog, we really fast cook. Raj Bog's offered at 12, they're cooked by 11, they're out of the kitchen gone home. Raj Bog's sitting there.
So Krishna is called meal,
That's,
Yeah, common sense.
impersonal.
has to be.
See, the thing is, we're dealing with a person. You know that story, I think it's about Jamuna Acharya and the son?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so like, Jamuna Acharya became a king. And one of the disciples, I think it was a disciple of his guru, wanted to bring him back to his Krishna consciousness. It was a pastime. But anyhow, so what he did, he made friends with the cook in the kitchen. He started bringing this sag for the king every day. And he'd bring it exactly the same time for his lunch. And so he became attached to the sag. And then one day he stopped. And the king said, "Where's my sag?" So Krishna likes the regularity, he likes the consistency. And so we should always try to be consistent in the service.
Yeah, that's how Krishna operates. That's how he organizes material. Well, the sun rises at a certain time, sets at a certain time, all the planets move according to Pacific time. That's how Krishna's arranged it. So especially his service should be following the normal order of time, not here and there and everywhere. Otherwise,
And also for us as well. It is regulated devotional service. But if we're not regulated, how do we purify ourselves? Because when you regulate, you start to control the mind, you start to control the senses. But if you're not regulated, the mind and the senses don't have control. So if it's according to your schedule, that's not regulation, that's just random. And so if you want to actually get the benefit of the process of deity worship, then be regulated. Be very regulated.
yeah, the arti starts at a certain time. It's not because someone's fast, they finish the arti earlier. No, the conch flows at this time and finishes at that time.
I've seen devotees doing full artis in 7 minutes. They're really going fast, you know. And they just want to get out, you know.
Super speed.
Yeah, we had one devotee who's dressing Govindasai in a record time because he was really keen on learning Madanga afterwards. And he got this. You know, sometimes this way. Every hours look out for these things. But the main point is as well as being able to tell devotees in a nice mood, not that you're heavy with devotees or you're not pleasant. It's a great art. But sometimes, especially as say the head pujaris or those in charge, you may be disturbed by what devotees doing. But if you come at them like like a lorry or something, they may just become offended and refuse to come in again. So that's a great art as well. Especially pujaris have to learn the art of correcting devotees in a loving way, making a point as well. That's not so easily done. It's very important.
Next.
So,
Chapatis have become a standard item on the Raj Bhog offering for decades. Some days they offer puris or bread chips because it is quicker or easier. Is this okay?
Prabhupada generally would have chapatis for lunch, and we kind of follow that standard. Puris are generally a breakfast thing.
chips means you roll out the pastry and cut it into
Yeah.
slices.
Deep fry.
It's not a chapati.
Right.
Chapatis are kind of quite a standard in ISKCON for the Raj bowl.
You the head of your area?
No.
No, what's his name?
Dianidi.
What's his name there?
Dharma Setu and Dianidi.
Dianidi, yeah, Dianidi. He came to a course in New Vrindavan.
So you have to look at, yeah, they have to see those things. You know, we've been doing puris for like 10 years and someone starts making chips.
But also the deity becomes accustomed to a particular cuisine. Because, it's a person, it's just like, like at home, every day on a Monday, we have really simple, just quinoa or rice and steamies, because after the weekend, you go to the Sunday feast, whatever like that, and your body's kind of like, older body's sort of struggling to deal with all that. So on Monday, we always have simple. And then the Mondays we don't, I'm thinking, where's my Monday? So it's different. So it's just nature that you become accustomed to this type of stuff. So it's same for Krishna. The reason we have that nature is because it's Krishna's nature. He likes to have his consistency. Next question.
Okay, is that if we perform morning puja of the altar in the pujaari room, it should always be in private behind curtains so devotees walking or cannot see or start chatting with us. Is this correct?
What sort of puja are you referring to?
The source
Small deities.
Govardhan, Shingalam, they take them off the altar and they put him in a special room
Yeah.
and put a curtain up and put a sign up saying, do not disturb the pujaari.
Yeah, well, I mean, if devotees are coming into the deity department and this is going on, then they should be aware that there's certain conduct because they're in the presence of the deity. And like to break silence during the worship is considered to be one of the offences in deity worship. And also, another one is to interrupt the worship. So it means like, I saw this the other day. Once you start to do something with the deities, say for instance you undress the deities, you need to keep going till you finish. You can't just undress the deities, wrap up a towel, leave them there. You have to, complete the worship.
This is the last one. Thank you so much for your time.
That's what we're here for.
So covering this Raj Bhog for the deity place, does that come for any reason and why?
So,
Covering the plates, yeah, I can, no, you cook it, then you cover the plates and bring it to the altar.
Yes.
It's very good, because we had a case, we didn't used to cover the plates. Our pujaari department is very small, it's about half the size of this room, a little bit bigger. And we didn't used to cover the plates from the kitchen, just brought them straight down onto the altar. But then I noticed that some pujaris, they were there doing the puja in the morning, and they would wait till the boga came past to decide whether they're going to stay to take a mark.
Yeah.
And devotees know, that's, devotees know, who's ever cooking, they know. So we started covering the plates. And that also helped devotees to know that they shouldn't be meditating or enjoying that. Even though they know they might guess what somebody is kind of creates. No, it's Krishna's. They're covering it.
only the cook, the pujari, and the deity should see the plate before it's offered.
It creates a chaste attitude towards it.
And even if you have someone who's not a brahmana helping in the kitchen, they shouldn't see the finished product until it's out after it's offered. But they might start contemplating enjoying the
That's
product.
easier said than done, but
Well, I mean, there's a letter of Prabhupada says they can help them outside the kitchen. Like people, if they're cutting up things like that, when they can help them outside the kitchen. They shouldn't make the finished product, but they shouldn't see the finished product.
So even if it's a short distance from your kitchen to the altar, I don't know what you're.
Always cover it, yeah.
So it's good to cover it. It lets everyone know, okay. Other than the puri is the example for that, isn't it? Other than the puri, when you've got the sweet rice, no?
Here.
That's not a pretty sweet,
Yeah.
cute, that's sweet, that's cute.
It was a shame for even thinking about meditating on what it tastes like. Zoe was for Krishna.
There's a lot of nice pastimes in Chaitanya Charitamrita related to deity worship. Same with, what was it, Bhagavad Pandit with the coconuts?
Yeah.
The whole idea of cleanliness, he's like, his focus on making sure that everything was clean. And in that story it's particularly interesting because it wasn't guaranteed that the bowl would become contaminated. There was a chance that it would become contaminated, therefore it rejected it. And so we need to develop that kind of determination to see that everything we offer to Krishna is as pure as it can possibly be.
That's a big problem. All of our food is sometimes donated, and it doesn't come in the best of condition, and we use that.
Of the rice flour.
Veggies, stuff like that, from like Trader Joe's, and, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, better you're using better quality food for the deities and that stuff you can use with roti prasad, more options. But everything for the deity should be first class. But not necessarily looking first class, it should be, like, because sometimes you get organic and non-organic, and usually non-organic is pumped full of chemicals, whereas the organic, it's no chemicals in it, but sometimes they don't look as good as the other stuff. But you know it's about quality because there's no pesticides and poisons and stuff. But yeah, everything for the deity should be first class. Prabhupada always was talking about first class dress, first class food offerings, first class incense, first class prayers, first class devotees. Well, everything first class first. And if we can develop this awareness, this appreciation of who it is we're dealing with, then naturally we want to give him everything first class. We could consider giving him something second class. Because he's God, he's the person I'm trying to develop a loving relationship with. It's just like, I mean, I'm sure we've all had the experience of developing a relationship with, like a boy or a girl or whatever, like a loving, intimate relationship. And especially in the early stages of the relationship, you're always trying to do something to please that person. You might buy them gifts, or you might take them to a restaurant or whatever, to try and please that person. Because you're always trying to do the best you can to make them happy. So, usually in these material relationships that wears off. But in a relationship with Krishna, the idea is that should be growing and evolving all the time. So we're always, trying to do more and more to please him.
There you go.
That was the smallest of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you got some
Something else? Yeah?
I just
You
think.
look after Tulsi, right?
Hmm?
You look after Tulsi?
No,
That's Sadashi.
no.
Okay.
I asked him earlier, who's that person?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Great.
Tulsi is so radiant.
Yeah.
It's beautiful here. So just thinking about, I know back in the day, because I'm coming from Detroit, and we used to always retire anything that was broken. What are the, understand that we want first class everything, like to what extent, how do you actually implement that if that's possible? And then also thinking about jewelry and then also thinking about clothing as well, and to what extent, can you?
The clothes are.
Depends on your finances as well, so rest according to what you can afford to do.
But if you have the resources, take Detroit for instance, you look at some of the paraphernalia they've got there, which was bought back in the heyday. And, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but they've got a bed for the deities which is about this big, made of pure sandalwood. To do something like this, that now would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's so fragrant, it's just amazing. And I remember the Jagannath's paraphernalia there was also very nicely looked after. But generally speaking, like clothes, the clothes you can mend them if you want. But there's a temple in India, in Guruvaya, they offer the deity new set of clothes every day. So he only wears it once and then they move it on. So if you have the resources, you can do that. But generally speaking, everything should be in good condition. Not that it should be, worn out. And clothing also, the thing is with the clothing, if you're careful with it, you can make it last much longer. A few tips with clothing: do not put blue tack on the clothes anywhere. That's a really good way to wreck clothes. When you put the clothes away, close all the Velcros, because the Velcros, some temples are stopping to use Velcros now. They're going back to. I remember when I first started dressing deities in Vrindavan, they didn't have Velcros, it was all ties, and you had to tie everything on. Some temples are going back to that, or they're using press studs. Because the Velcros, particular types of fabric, the hooks will grab on stuff, and they'll pull it apart, especially some of these trims you get, things like that, they pull them apart. And then you wind up with all these sort of, fragile looking edges and stuff. And also make sure the clothes are made properly. That's why I was, a bit of a plug before about my border line threads. We don't use glue. If you glue the hems, you glue the sequins, they're going to come apart because the glue they're using is not that good. They just get a glue gun, and just look after things, with the crowns and stuff. One thing you can do with the crowns, the mucket pieces, all that sort of stuff, is you get like a polyvinyl acetate glue. These craft glues, the white craft glues. I'm sure you have them here.
We use wood glue.
Yeah, it's like the PVA. It's called craft glue, wood glue, whatever. You paint the back of because it's got a cardboard backing. You paint the back and around the edges, not the front, but just around the edges, and that sort of rubberizes the whole thing and makes it much more durable. So if you put glue tack on the back, it doesn't, because you see how the red part separates and comes off because of the glue tack. But if you paint up this PVA glue, it's much more durable and it doesn't come apart so easily. Don't put glue tack on any jarring on the crowns or the mucket pieces. Again, they get really dirty. Change the glue tack regularly because the glue tack gets very dirty. And the glue tack you use here, just in my experience, is not a very high quality glue tack. It's really gummy.
Very good.
There's one you can get from, I don't think it's even called, this is like, what do you call it, what is it? It's a typing correction thing, isn't it? The stuff you use here?
I have no idea.
Huh?
The stuff you get from England is the best stuff.
The 3M,
But they don't sell that here.
3M or Bostik, they make the stuff called glue tack.
Yeah.
So they could have brought some over.
They just go on Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon, you can get, sure you get.
Yeah, but just get the grey blue stuff. It's much better. It's not as sticky and it doesn't go gummy as fast.
Called Bostik.
Yeah.
Bostik.
We know, yeah. Like I had a few packets when I was last there. They're all gone.
You can't get it on Amazon?
I'll check, but normally that's what we do. When we go to England, we will call ahead and say.
But the stuff in England is expensive. I can get it from the supermarket in Coles for $2 a packet.
Here?
In Australia, $2 a packet. Australia's an expensive place. But yeah, if you get stuff like that, it's good. And I remember Ram Bhadra, when he was here, he used to actually get wigs for the deities for Radha Govinda from Sydney, because they were really good wigs. He actually told me they had a place where when I was on Sankirtan, we used to go to the same place to buy wigs to do Sankirtan.
Is that the one?
Yeah, that's the stuff. That's on Amazon?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's much better. The stuff you use here is just really gummy and just gets
Yeah,
into
plastic.
everything.
That's too soft.
Yeah.
It's gummy. It's really
Like
silly.
oils come out of it.
Stays on it.
Yeah, well, the blue tack's got oil in it, but it seems to hold its kind of keep its consistency much longer. But if you put it on the clothes, you'll permanently stain the clothes. If you put it on the jari work, what happens is there's residue there and it'll get dirty. Yeah, but everything for the deity should be really nice. If the silverware is looking beat up, replace it. The paraphernalia is looking beat up, replace it. It's not that hard to do. Find someone who wants to give a donation, give some nice silverware.
Yeah, normally people are really eager to sponsor things for the deities. It's not so hard.
And then you can auction the old things off. Anything else?
He always has so many questions. I'm surprised he doesn't have.
I have questions.
He's like a wealth of knowledge.
I don't have any questions.
That's what answers.
The one thing, I really want to encourage you to do, if you want to satisfy Krishna, just be clean. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else. You certainly don't have to learn complicated rituals. You don't have to learn how to do fancy things with your fingers and stuff like that. Just be clean. Prabhupada told us at the Rukmini, the idea is sometimes that will satisfy Krishna. So if you want to satisfy Krishna, be clean. Both within yourself, your personal, whatever you do, but also with your worship, all the worship happening and stuff like that. in the middle of a big city here. I've lived in many temples I used to be the temple commander in Sydney Temple, in the middle of a big city. Everything is, you got to clean everything every day. But just clean. Clean after. Hard to find good cleaning groups here though. I've tried a few so far and they don't work very well. But you just got to be clean. That's the key to pleasing Krishna with the universe. Be really, really clean. Okay, the rest of the temple can't do much about that. If you step into the majority department, it's like, you've been to my poor county, right? Who's been to my poor county? Yeah? What do you notice about it? It's clean. When people walk in there, they say, wow, I feel like I'm not in India anymore. Because it's clean. And the thing is like,
Outside the door, it's not clean.
Yeah. Another shoes.
The thing is, like Krishna's cockroaches says, example is better than precept. So we can talk so many different rules, but if we don't set the example, it's meaningless. So I really encourage you to just focus on the cleanliness here. Just really make the Pujari department an example of cleanliness for everyone to follow. And just by making the Pujari department clean, it'll spread throughout the temple. The whole temple will become clean. Okay. We have Shrimad Vice President here too. Okay, thank you so much for Prabhupada. Elevate the Bhakti They said they had a drinking zone today. Yeah, I went and paid them this morning, just before you. They said they had done today. The other guy was, maybe Tuesday. No.